This is John McMurray of the Society for American Baseball Research, and I'm pleased to be speaking today with Joel Skinner for our SABR Oral History. Joel played in the major leagues as a catcher for 9 seasons from 1983 through 1991 with the Chicago White Sox, New York Yankees, and Cleveland Indians. He then began a long career in managing and coaching, both in the minor leagues and as Cleveland's interim manager in 2002. We are recording this oral history with Joel's permission on February the 12th, 2026. And Joel, I wanted to ask you first how you became interested in baseball.
Well, it was in my family. My dad was a major leaguer for a lot of years. I grew up with three older brothers, and it was just something that I don't know. I just was always around it. It was something that I just fell in love with at a young age. And then I'll never forget. Growing up in San Diego. It was the winter time, actually, like right about this time of year. My mom came home from the grocery store and she said, "Hey, I saw Mr. Wolf at today's signups for Little League." And back then, in the late '60s, you didn't start playing until you're 8 years old. But in the meantime, I had obviously played a lot of wiffle ball and all the different stuff and hanging around the ballparks with my pops. But so yeah, we signed up and went from there. But it's something that watching my dad play, I remember St. Louis was his last 3 seasons in St. Louis, and I don't really remember Pittsburgh too much or Cincinnati, but I do remember those days, and it's just something that was just part of the family. Like I said, I had three older brothers. None of them played beyond youth ball. They didn't even play high school ball, but it was something that growing up in San Diego, it was a hotbed of baseball. My senior year in high school, back then, I don't know if they still do it, but the CIF, we had a city-county game for the seniors, and on our team, we had multiple major leaguers just at high school, and so that was something that just, I guess, being involved with really competitive baseball at a young age helped out.
Did you have a favorite team or a favorite player, or was your dad your primary influence?
My favorite team, actually, I really liked the Pirates. I mean, even when he was coaching the Padres later on, I always had just a love affair with the Pirates. I don't know if you back in like '71, I was 10 years old. I think they had a 300 hitter at every position. Manny Sanguillen always stuck out. I just loved the way he just seemed like he was one of the first catchers to stick his knee out and get down with legs sticking out. And then I'm kind of an observant type of learner, and I really kept my eyes on Johnny Bench and the style of play and the way he set up behind the plate and how he gave signs and the whole 9 yards. But those basically the Big Red Machine, I guess, and the Pirates. I was always a National League fan. American League, getting bubblegum cards and all that. If it was an American League team, there wasn't much excitement there.
At what point did you know you wanted to be a catcher?
Well, I always liked the position. It was something that just really intrigued me. My first glove was actually given to my dad. Got an old glove from Bob Euchre. It had no break in it. It was bigger than I was, but the position just was something that I just fell in love with. But as a youngster coming up, for the most part, you end up playing shortstop because you have the ability to throw the ball across the diamond and help your team out. And so I didn't really start playing behind the plate until my junior year of high school. I talked to my coach, Coach Pugh at Mission Bay High School. And I said, I didn't want to be selfish, but I said, I want to catch full time. And I helped the team out. We used to play 3 games a week, and on Thursdays I would pitch. And but catcher was just something that I just fell in love with.
Now, at Mission Bay High School, when were you first scouted, and who scouted you?
Well, we played where there were scouts in our stands. because the competition was really pretty fierce at the time. I mean, from a standpoint of there were players on all the teams that could either get college or professional looks. So, but I was scouted by Joel Brown, who was the former Pirates general manager for all those years, and as a catcher. And that was the thing that made me feel good about it. There were other teams, the White Sox, I think the Cardinals, the Giants. Uh, uh, I think there was a scout named Marty Keogh, Matt's dad, who my dad knew. And I think obviously uh, being in the industry with my family, I kind of knew some people. They would talk to me, but they all wanted me to pitch because I had a good strong arm and a frame of, in high school I was 6'4", 190 pounds. So I had a pitcher's type body, but I just loved to catch. And the Pirates, actually, Joel Brown, he liked me as a catcher. So hey, that's all I needed. And then they ended up, and I really did. I wasn't interested actually in signing at the time. I ended up going to Mission Bay High School or Mesa Junior College. There was a coach there named Sandback, and he had a pedigree of catchers. He was a long time high school coach, and then he moved on to the junior college ranks, and he had guys like he had one of the Boones, Bob Boone. He had Eddie Herman. I want to say Blackwell. There was like 4 or 5 major league catchers that came out of his program. So I wanted to go play there, and then I ended up signing in December of '79. But Joel Brown had come back to me. That was back before they used to have a January draft. And it was so you had eligibility twice a year if you weren't at a 4-year school. And boy, had things changed, I guess. But so the Pirates had drafted me real low. They told my dad was actually working with the Pirates as a hitting coach that year. That was the year of the We Are Family World Champions. But so my dad and I wasn't ready to go play professional baseball at that time. But I really blossomed after I graduated that summer playing in Southern California in the Cal Collegiate League, and then for the junior college. And then right before the January draft, the Pirates came back to me and they said, hey, listen, you're going to get drafted and we don't have a pick high enough to maintain your rights. So they were going to lose my rights. And so they actually offered me, I think it was like $25,000. And at that time, it was like, whoa, okay, that's enough for me to get a look. I could play for a year or two, see where I go, see how I advance. And that's all I needed. I wasn't, I didn't want to go to school. I wanted to go play ball. And at that point in time, I was ready to go play. And so I went to spring training in 1980. Yeah, I was 18 years old. I turned 19 in spring training of 1980.
Now, you did have a few years in the minor leagues. Tell us about your development at single A and double A ball.
Yeah, what happened was with the Pirates, they sent me to I guess nowadays they would call it more of a slower A level. It was for the younger kids, and I was the younger of that group even. But so we played. I played in it was called the Western Carolina League at the time in Shelby, and then they changed the affiliation. Went to Greenwood and played another year at that same level, 2 years. And that year I really started to kind of get into my body. I was kind of a young colt type body. I just couldn't really, my coordination was getting better. And my second year of A ball was when I started to actually I started to move my bat speed got better, my strength got better. And as a result, I started to do a little more things, not just behind the plate. I could always catch. For some reason, I could always catch the ball. I had no problem. My managers felt that from the receiving standpoint and all the parts that come with it, that was fine. It was just the offense of just being able to, actually nowadays put the ball in play and have something behind it, and so that started to develop and with my strength, and then the biggest part of my career from a young player was I went to instructional league in 1981, and back then we would play. Not only I was just turned 20, played over 100 games, and then we went to instructional league, and they would put us back there for another 2, 3. I think it was 2 more months, 2 full months, 8 weeks of we would do our drills in the morning and play a game in the afternoon down in Sarasota, Bradenton area. And the Yankees were there, the White Sox. So there was like 4 or 5 teams within a close proximity, and we would play each other every day. Even the Japanese would come and they would bring the Carps, I think, were down there for a couple weeks out of that period of time. But so it was competitive baseball. We would have the younger guys would play, but also the older players from AAA would even come down and maybe do a position change, and then they would go off to winter ball. So it was quite a program back then. It was something that they don't really do as much nowadays. But so I really shined down there, and the White Sox saw me because they were part of that program. I was still with the Pirates, and that's when the first compensation draft was for major league free agents. They used to have what they called a free agent draft. So you had to draft a major leaguer just to negotiate with them. It was a really interesting. It was coming out of the '81 strike, and so that year. Long story, the White Sox picked me as compensation for, I want to say the White Sox lost their closer, Ed Farmer. And so they were able to choose the White Sox could choose throughout the whole professional ranks. And I think each team could only protect maybe 20, 25 players. So not only were your minor leagues exposed, your major league 15 of your 40-man roster guys were exposed. So it was that was a feather in my cap, and that really kind of got me on the kind of the prospect route of a young ball player.
Now, given that you were a fan of the Pirates growing up and you'd been in the Pirates organization, how did you feel going to the Chicago White Sox in February of 1982?
Yeah, I'll never forget it. It was before spring training. I had received a contract from the Pirates for like $900 a month or whatever it was, and I was scheduled to go to AA, and I think at that time AA was in Buffalo, but the Pirates, Pete Peterson called our house, and so I answered it. I was the only one home, and then we had a gentleman, one of my dad's buddies at the house. He was actually working on some electrical issues. And he said, "Hey, you're now. I got good news and bad news. The good news is you were picked in the compensation. The bad news is you're now a White Sox." So then, quickly, the White Sox called and explained what happened, and it was a good thing. But I was kind of pissed just from the standpoint of I wanted to, I signed with the Pirates. I thought I was how that works. But anyway. But it was fine once I realized and could wrap my brain around it and told my dad what happened. And so it really was, again, it was like becoming a number 1 pick type thing.
So you spend time with the White Sox organization in the minor leagues, and tell us about your major league debut, because you played a doubleheader on that day that you actually debuted June the 12th of 1983.
Yeah, we were playing. I was in Denver, and our manager Jim Mahoney called me in and said, "Hey, listen, you're going to the big leagues." And it was like, whoa! And at that time, Carlton Fisk, Hall of Fame catcher, was the starting catcher for the White Sox, and Mark Hill was the backup, and I was kind of the third guy in the pecking order, playing every day in AAA. I was 22 years old, and got to they called me up. It was a day game, doubleheader. Noon start in Oakland. And I'll never forget, they said, and all our AAA manager told me was Carlton had taken a foul tip in his throwing shoulder. And and he had gotten off to a slow start that year, which was fine. But so this is the middle of June, and so I'll never forget it. I'm walking down the tunnel, and it's like the whole team's out, and they're taking infield, and Carlton's throwing bullets to second base, and I'm thinking something's not right here. So anyway, I do my hello, how you doing type of thing, and so the first game starts. We end up, coming back. Mark Hill's pinch hit for, I think, Jerry Hairston, and he was our pinch hitter extraordinaire. This guy, he could really hit off the bench. But I went into the game, and then we ended up, I think Ron Kittle hit a double or something. That was his, he was rookie of the year that year. But anyway, we ended up coming back and winning the game. And I was able to catch 3 or 4 innings and got my first at bat. And sure enough, it was, I'll never forget, I hit a comebacker right to the pitcher. And it was like, you got to be kidding me. And so the game's over, and now I'm starting game 2. And Jerry Kuzman is pitching. And this is funny. So after the first inning, I come in, I sit next to him. I said, I'm obviously nervous. I said, hey, is there anything I could do different? Is there anything you need? He goes, do me one favor. He said, quit throwing the ball back so hard to the mound, because I was just so excited. But so that worked out well. I ended up getting a couple hits. Chris Cotteroli was pitching for Oakland, and we won that game. And basically got on the plane, flew back to Chicago. We got rained out the next day, and then I was back in the minor league. So I don't know what all went down, but it wasn't as big a deal, I don't think, for Carlton's shoulder or whatever. But I don't know what it was all about. But he went on to, basically, he should have or could have won the MVP that year. He had such a great second half.
How were you received by the White Sox when you first came up to the major leagues? Obviously, a very successful team, a lot of veterans on that team. There weren't as many young players as there are today. What was it like?
It was one of those situations where you just try and fit in. Back then, just try and keep your mouth shut and ears open and contribute when you're called upon. As a youngster coming up, it was quite a learning curve with veteran pitchers. As a catcher, I think you can learn just as much or more from your teammates. And so if you're able to put yourself aside and just try and absorb as much as you can, and that's what I did, and went on from there. It was an interesting situation in Chicago, because I ended up using all my options in the minor leagues, and went up in 86 opening day catcher, and Carlton, Tony La Russa, our manager, had put him in left field. And I mean, deep down, I knew that's not, personally, I didn't think that was going to work. But here's a Hall of Fame catcher, and I don't think he was having it either. But at that point in time, they just, I'm not going to complain. And but then I ended up getting traded middle of that year to New York.
Now, obviously, in your first season, you only played in 6 games in 1983, but you were back and you played in 43 in 1984 and 22 more in 85 before your larger role in 1986. But tell us about some of the players that you got to observe while you were there. Would love to get your reflections on, to start, Ron Kittle, because you mentioned his extraordinary rookie season in 1983.
Yeah, Ronnie was the guy I actually played with in 3 different towns. We played with him in obviously in Chicago and New York, and then a little bit in Cleveland. But yeah, he was a guy that, just tremendous power. Came up. He was a no-named. He was a catcher that kicked around. I think the Dodgers initially signed him from Indiana, but he had some injury problems. And then in I think the summer of '82, he just went off in AAA baseball, and him and Walker were both just up in Edmonton, and it was like we were just hearing how he's hitting all these home runs, and obviously it was the Coast League, but even that was, the numbers were just as strong, just out of this world, and he just was a tremendous power hitter, and he ended up the next year being Rookie of the Year. But yeah, he was a guy that just was. It was just a really cool story because Rookie of the Year, All-Star game in Chicago in '83, and he really obviously helped out that team.
How about Greg Luzinski?
Yeah, we had that was Bull was our DH, and yeah, it was a. I mean, I think back then uh, Doug Rader. I think he was the manager of that was when the Western Division, the Rangers, and he said that the White Sox were winning ugly or something, and that's what I mean, the lineup was just phenomenal with Fisk and Harold Baines, a pure hitter, Lazinski, Kittle. I mean, Rudy Law was leading off, and Julio Cruz was a late addition to the team and just was a spark plug from Seattle. Scotty Fletcher and Dubzinski. Vance Law played third. Greg Walker and played first base. I mean, there was a bat at every position, and back then they used to tell us, how do you play left field? You play left field like you're leaning on a bat. That's how you play left field. The corners all leaned on bats, and the middle of the field could catch the ball. That's how the White Sox were. But it was a great team.
You mentioned Doug Rader saying the team was winning ugly. It was the way that they were winning games, that they weren't overpowering people, but they were kind of sliding by at that time. But he also said it extended to their uniforms, which were not necessarily the best looking in his opinion.
Yeah, you can get our pants didn't go down they were just the opposite of what they do nowadays. Our pants were barely covered your kneecaps, and we had horizontal stripes, and obviously the White Sox, and then and we had the kind of computer type font with the Sox across the front and all the multiple colors. So yeah, it was. They were interesting uniforms, and we didn't have to. Before that, in spring training, I wasn't old enough, but we had the older because we would wear the hand-me-downs. We had the collared shirts, and we didn't have to tuck our jerseys in. So that was actually, if you were late to the ballpark or for late to stretch, it was easy to get your uniform on. You didn't have to worry about tucking your jersey in.
That White Sox team had three lefties in its starting rotation: Floyd Bannister, Britt Burns, and Jerry Koosman, to go along with Richard Dotson and Lamar Hoyt. I wondered if you could characterize that pitching rotation for us, and also tell us what you recall about seeing Lamar Hoyt during his remarkable 1983 season.
Yeah, it was just phenomenal. I mean, and Bannister and Dotson the second half were just, I mean, it was crazy how good they were. And but they had, between Lamar, Richard, I mean, and Bannister, those three, they were all like pitching like number ones at that. I mean, it was ridiculous how, I mean, they were just phenomenal. And Britt Burns was he had a riding fastball and a split change that he would throw. And Jerry Koosman just, he just, was, at that point in his career, he still had a great arm, but his control was phenomenal. And but it was one of those pitching staffs now that I don't know if they could afford them, because it was just five guys that were just, I mean, you could plug any team would have taken any one of those guys, and they went out and just basically dominated the second half of the season. Dotson, I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, those guys, he would throw his fastball and changeup, and it was just like, I mean, it was over. And obviously, Lamar Hoyt's control was just phenomenal. I mean, he could put his slider, he could backdoor it, he could put it on both sides of the plate. He could crisscross both edges. It was a great learning curve for me, and it made it very easy to receive and catch the ball because those guys knew exactly what they were doing.
That team was exceptional and had Chicago's first postseason appearance since 1959. What was it like in the locker room with that team?
Yeah, it was. There was a good group of guys. They enjoyed themselves. They obviously, winning is something that creates a lot of. Everything was good about that team. I mean, it was something that back then there was no. You went right to the playoffs, And I wasn't eligible for the playoffs. I didn't make the 25-man roster, but I was there for. I guess we kept a couple players for taxi squad type situations, but we ran into the Orioles and Ripken and Murray. Seemed like those two hit every inning, and they ended up we lost to them, and then they won the World Series that year, I believe. But so yeah, it was very competitive baseball. Obviously, my first exposure to it.
Now, in 1985, you saw Ozzie Guillen during his Rookie of the Year season. Tell us what you recall about that.
Yeah, that was a year I went to Buffalo. I didn't make the ball club out of spring training, and ended up playing quite a bit there. And we had the big trade that traded Lamar to San Diego to get Ozzie. And live character. You knew he was on the field, just his, the way he carried himself, and a lot of energy, and tremendous shortstop. And so he was definitely one of those guys that just brought a lot of energy to the ball club, and obviously his ability to play shortstop was over the top.
That was a young catcher. How did you interact with pitchers? Were they calling the game? Were you calling the game when you were coming up as a young player?
Yeah, that's one thing that I'm very fortunate. I came up in the era of baseball where they actually let, from a standpoint of the catchers, they let us call the game. And that was something that I was fortunate enough. Dave Duncan was my pitching coach with the White Sox. And we would go over the opposing team. He had a notebook that he would have his history, and we would talk about things and pitcher strengths and how we would attack the hitters. And then during the game, he would want to know like where the pitch was. He was kind of ahead of his time from that standpoint of he kept just really meticulous notes. And but saying that, he let us call the game. And we would have our meetings and prior to, but every pitcher has a head and a neck to shake off, and I never took it personal. And you can learn from as a catcher personally. If the pitcher didn't shake me off, I was kind of concerned at times because I wanted to learn them too, But a lot of pitchers just would get in the flow, and we would go and depending on how things were going and go from there. But all the way through the minor leagues, all my managers, they never called pitches. And it was on us. And then we would, obviously there were times during my career where certain managers might not, they after the fact. But again, it was always me calling the game, and pitchers have always had the ability to shake their head.
If someone were seeing you as a player during your first few years in Chicago, give us a scouting report on what kind of a player you were, both offensively and defensively.
Well, coming up from the minor leagues, I was primarily a defensive catcher from that standpoint. I was always the youngest player kind of on my team, even going through the minor leagues and getting to the major leagues at a young age. But I kind of a sneak attack hitter from a standpoint of if you took me lightly, I could come in and do some damage. So, but I hit enough to play in the big leagues, and obviously, but catching, throwing, I had a really good arm. And back in the 80s, it's kind of coming back now. But base running, we play. You play Vince Coleman's of the world and all these guys. There was base stealing going on. Tim Raines and the National League brand of ball. So I mean, controlling the running game was one of my biggest attributes, and that's something that having the ability to throw and be accurate, to throw to second base, and to control the running game, and to keep that at bay so the teams just couldn't run you right off the field. Because, the Royals in our division were a team that would they would take advantage. And if you didn't have the ability to control that a little bit with not only your pitching staff, but the catchers to be able to throw, it could get out of hand. But defensively first, but I think my career batting average is like 228 or whatever. But I hit enough to, keep them honest.
You mentioned before the situation in 1986 where Carlton Fisk was put in the outfield and you were catching. Ken Harrelson, the new GM, had come in, and this was part of his plan. It made sense on paper. Fisk was 38 years old. Did the team come to both of you and ask if you wanted to do that? And was there any tension between you and Fisk as a result of this change?
I don't think there was really tension between us personally. I mean, but I don't think it was something that he was too, hot on, and I don't blame him. But I was the young kid coming in, and I wasn't trying to, come riding in on a big white horse and all this kind of stuff. I was just trying to, feed my family, and so from that standpoint, I was just trying to play ball, and that's I left that to the other side of the coin. But again, when you're a young player at that time, I was 25 years old, trying to it was my first time. I by that time I had about a year or so in the big leagues of just being that third catcher that when something would happen, you come up to the big leagues from AAA. But now I was made the team out of spring training for the first time, and was trying to make a name for myself also.
What was it like to play for Tony La Russa?
I liked it. He was a guy that he talked to us. He let me know where I stood. He was always trying to get an edge. So from that standpoint, and being a young player on a veteran team, I mean, it was something that again he was he kept you on your toes, and he'd always have something to say. He'd give you a thought for the day type of situations, and he would walk around the outfield during pregame batting practice and have a little something to say and something to think about, and maybe something about the other team, where they stood, if they were hot, cold, whatever. And just it wasn't he was approachable. And I'll never forget, I think we were in Cleveland, and I came into the ballpark, and not only was my bag packed, but my locker, I was number 12 at the time. It said 12, but it said Smalley. So I went in to his office, and I told him, I said, "Tony, we got to quit beating like this." And he said, "Yeah, sit down for a minute. We made a trade, and you're going back to Denver," or whatever it was at the time. So, but yeah, it was could talk to him, and wasn't standoffish by no means.
Now, that experiment with Fisk in left field only lasted until May. And later that same season, in July, you were traded to the New York Yankees. Tell us about the circumstances surrounding that and how you felt about the trade.
Yeah, it was a situation where Tony had gotten fired, and they brought in Jim Fregosi as our manager, and so it was just a lot of turmoil in Chicago, and again, Carlton was catching. I was, wasn't playing as much. And that year, Carlton got sick. He had the flu. It was kind of pre All-Star break, or not, pre-trade deadline, All-Star, whatever that point of time was. And I got some playing time. I actually played well against the Yankees. And but come trading deadline, and they made the trade, and I was traded to the Yankees, and I felt good about it. Anytime. You can look at it two ways. They didn't want me, or they wanted me. So I looked at it like, well, they wanted me. So I went there, and it was a 3-player trade on our side. Me, Ron Kittle, and Wayne Tollison for Passy, and I think Carlos Martinez might have been a up and coming minor leaguer at the time, but or Carlos Martinez maybe. I can't remember, but. So yeah, I was excited about it. I got to play every day the second half of the '86 season, and it went on from there. But I really enjoyed my time in New York.
Some of the pitchers that you got to catch in New York included Ron Guidry, Dave Righetti during the '86 season when he led the league in saves, and also Joe Niekro, a knuckleballer. Tell us about those three.
Yeah, those guys. They're on my, they're way up there on the list. I mean, those guys, Gator was one of those guys that just, what a competitor, what an athlete. And his slider would just go straight down. It was just so, he was just such a joy to catch, and obviously he could field his position, everything, and that was towards the tail end of his career. But he could still, you could see why he was so good. And Negro, that was an experience for me. That was something that and Jeff Torborg was our bullpen coach at the time, and he helped me out a little bit, and I just. I was blessed with the ability to catch the ball. I don't know how to explain it, and it didn't bother me to catch a knuckleball. It was something that I just I set up a little bit different. I didn't really give him a target. I just kind of showed him the back of my hand, and so that I could always go to my left, because that would be the against the grain. Excuse me, but he wasn't a pure knuckleballer. He always could mix in something else. But I mean, he was a knuckleball pitcher. Don't get me wrong, but there was always room for a little cutter here or something. But and he would, every once in a while grab 85 and throw a fastball. But no, he was fun to catch. And I think from just my demeanor, whereas other catchers would get so flustered and they would get so upset and so nervous, or whatever the emotions were trying to catch a knuckleballer, and I didn't give it any mind. I knew that it was just hey, it was something I could do. And I'll never forget, we were playing in Anaheim, and there was a runner on third, and he threw a knuckleball, and it just went dead to my right, and I couldn't cross over to catch it, so I just stuck my hand out and caught it barehanded. And Joe came into the dugout, and he said, "You can catch me anytime you want," because it was just instinct. Caught it. That's all I could do, and I was able to knock the ball down and keep it in front of me. And but again, that actually dovetailed into me when I went to Cleveland at catching Tom Candiotti. But anyway. But then Righetti he was the best from a standpoint of he'd come in, save our game. And I've actually got a ball from that year when Dave set the record of saves. He signed the ball to me. And but he was just, from a standpoint of guys that just, he'd come in and the place would be going wild, and he'd be throwing that high fastball and that back leg slider, but he always had that steady Eddie. He could pinpoint that fastball on the outside corner, knee high. So that was always he was always had that in his back pocket. And but he's a modern, from a standpoint of what they look at now, that's what he did. He threw the breaking balls that disappeared in that high riding fastball, but he always had that ability to hit the outside corner down. And from a catcher standpoint, if you always knew that you had that pitch, you could do a lot of things.
Those Yankee teams that you played on were veteran teams. You had guys like Mattingly, Randolph, Winfield, Henderson, but at the same time, those weren't World Series teams. What was it about those teams that didn't allow them to get over the hump?
Well, I think the Red Sox in '86, the Blue Jays, it was a great, the Eastern Division was stacked. But again, I think if you look back at it, I don't know if you'd have analytically or whatever the situation may be. I think it's always comes down to, usually starting pitching from a standpoint of just having enough of them. I mean, not that we didn't have starting pitching, but just always, because that team scored runs, but it's a lot just over the years when you don't have to score runs. It's conducive to scoring more runs at times, but maybe that one extra pitcher. But again, it was really competitive, and position player wise. I mean, you look at Ricky Henderson. He scored more runs than anybody ever in the game, and Dave Winfield, and we had position players all over the place, and but it was just competitive Eastern Division, and we just came short.
On all the teams that you played on, you always had, it seemed, one other really good catcher. Did you work alongside catchers, whether Butch Weiniger or Don Slaught, or any of the other catchers that were your teammates? Did any of them help you become a better catcher?
Yeah, I think so. From a standpoint of, you become a team from a standpoint of, it's like, as the catchers, you have to feed off of each other and communicate. And whether it be, like I said, Carlton and Mark Hill and in New York, Donnie Slott and all the different guys that you have to, communicate and talk about what's going on, and you have your pitchers and catchers meetings and go from there. So it was always at least with my personality, I never had any qualms or any problems with anybody, and you just try and you try and help your team and go from there.
In March of '89, you're traded by the Yankees along with Turner Ward to Cleveland for Mel Hall. How did you feel about going to Cleveland at that time?
At that time, I was a little bit, I went into Bob Quinn's office, and we were down in Fort Lauderdale, and the day before, we were in Sarasota playing the White Sox, and Mr. Steinbrenner was out in the outfield talking to our manager, Lou Pinnell at the time, and it was like, man, something's up. And or actually, I take that back. It was Dallas Green was our manager, and Winfield had hurt his back, and the word was out that he was going to have surgery and he was going to miss the year. And it was like, oh no! And at that time, we had the rumors mill was kind of stirring, and I said, oh, it doesn't look good. And I'll never forget telling Bob Guerin was one of our catchers at the time. He was kind of the younger of the, he's my age, but he didn't have quite as much experience at that point in time. And I told him, I said, I think I'm out of here. And so the next day, I was traded for an outfielder, Mel Hall, so that they could replace Winfield, and I went to Cleveland. And but I kind of, at that time, I didn't know much about Cleveland at all. I knew that, I just from playing there, that the ballpark was, kind of an old throwback, multiple, just basically a racetrack type ballpark. And it was just like, wow. And, but when I got to Cleveland, it was life changing. It was something that I still make my home in Northeast Ohio, and I've never left. But I was kind of thrown aback, and it was just a different. Back then, it was just different. I know one of the funny stories was I met the team in Palm Springs, and I was getting my new uniform, and they didn't have I needed a belt, and so the head trainer Jimmy told Paul, this assistant trainer, give him your belt. So I had to wear the trainer's belt for the game in Palm Springs. But once we got to Tucson, I got organized. But no, it was fine. It was, but again, it was just a part of your career, and as a professional, you realize those things can happen, and you make the best of it.
And you had reason for optimism with that young pitching staff. John Farrell, you mentioned Candiotti, Greg Swindell, Rod Nichols, Bud Black, some good young talent there.
Oh yeah, and I really enjoyed it. And again, these guys, they knew what they were doing, and it was just this. But we were that team that we had Corey Snyder, Joe Carter, all these guys that I had played with coming up, even like Joe Carter, and he was in Des Moines when I was in Denver. So it was a lot of these guys that I had met before and played with in the minor leagues, and but I fit right in. And at '89, Andy Allenson was coming off of a year prior that he had hit for a little bit of an average. And so I had a tough time kind of cracking the lineup a little bit there the first year. Doc Edwards was our manager. And then after he left, John McNamara became the manager, and I ended up getting a little bit more playing time. And then obviously Sandy came too, and Alomar. But it was a situation where, one thing I think over my career, I played in over 100 games in the big leagues per season, I think twice. But but I had the ability to come in and play the 50 games as a backup catcher or whatever it was, and play the game the way that I wasn't trying to get 4 hits because I hadn't played in 3 or 4 days type of situation. I played the game the way the game was dictated, and I think that a lot of backup catchers or players that come off the bench, they try and do too much because they know they're not going to, no matter what they do, they're not going to get another crack for a few days. So I just embraced the position of, what can I do today to help us win this game? And that really helped me. And I think that's just coming up in a family of, with my dad's tutelage and things like that helped me from that standpoint.
You had the chance to catch Steve Olin, a young relief pitcher whose life was cut short in an accident in 1993. Tell us what you remember about Steve.
Yeah, he was a guy that it was so sad. I mean, it was a situation on a day off that the boating accident down in Florida. But Ole was a young relief pitcher. He was a side wheeling, kind of like Ike Horn type of real low down, kind of Chad Bradford type, just way low. And came in and he took over kind of the closing situation for Doug Jones. Doug Jones was our closer prior to that, and but Ole was, he did a great job, and he was destined to, he was somebody that he could miss bats and get the ball put on the ground when they made contact, and it was just sad to see that happen. He had a young family at the time, a couple babies. It was just, all in all, just a horrific day in Indians history.
Now, those Cleveland teams were not championship contenders yet, but certainly in 1991 it was a very difficult year for Cleveland. Tell us about what it was like playing, even though you had all of that young talent, it hadn't quite all come together yet.
No, we had made the trade. We had traded Carter. And we got Sandy Alomar back. We made the trade. We got Kenny Lofton. We got Chris James had come over from the Padres, and Carlos Baerga. And so it was a young group of guys that just needed some seasoning and just some experience. And but then all of a sudden everything started to click. And John Hart was our had taken over as the general manager, and he was bringing in people. And so from that standpoint, the 91 season, we had our hats handed to us a little bit, but Sandy had been hurt that year. He had some shoulder problems. I ended up catching quite a bit, but our young pitchers, Charlie Nagy was, these guys were learning on the job. It was from a standpoint of that. Then come, I think, 94, I was retired by then. That was my last year trying to play. I had hurt my arm, but by that time they started adding the Dennis Martinez's of the world, and all of a sudden things really started, to develop in Cleveland, and that's when they really took off.
Now, you stayed with the Major League club in Cleveland through 1991, but you remained as a player, at least on the minor league level, until 1994. Tell us what was going on there.
Yeah, in 91, in September of 91, I blew out my arm. I hurt my shoulder. It was, I think the last game was in September, but the weather had turned, and I had been playing with a bad shoulder, and so we had to try and do something to fix it at the time, and so I missed the next 2 seasons. I was on the Major League roster on the disabled list with we kept trying to figure something out to get my arm to work, and we couldn't get it to. And it was at the time, and so by 92 and 93, I was on the Major League disabled list. And then in 94, I tried to play a little bit to see if I could to make a comeback type of situation. And I retired. I went to Charlotte, played a little bit, and it just, as an athlete, you just know when it's time, and it was time for me to. I wasn't playing to my standards, and so I retired. But so that's how that all went down. It wasn't a situation where I couldn't physically do it anymore, and my arm told me that, and so it was just I had a young family and went on from there.
You spent part of 10 seasons in the minor leagues, a lot of moving around. Tell us about how challenging it can be as a player when you are spending part of a season in one place and part of a season in another place.
Well, I kind of did it two different ways. The first go around was, I went 2 years of A ball, double A, triple A, and then a little bit, then you're the third catcher in triple A type situation. So that was Buffalo and Denver. And then the second time in the minor leagues, I was as a manager. I had a couple rehab stints at the end there trying to see if I could play. But then in '95 is when I started managing in the minor leagues. I actually asked my wife, I asked her if she was willing to let's do this. And so she said, yeah, let's go for it. So that's when I went back to the minor leagues as a manager and was able to do that and get back to actually I got back to Akron in '98, which was in Northeast Ohio. So I was able to get back home. But again, it was just it's part of it. Just you have to get into the to do something. You have to get into sometimes you have to get into the weeds a little bit.
Now, after you left the game as a player, Cleveland hired you as a minor league instructor. At what point did you realize that you wanted to be involved in coaching or managing?
Well, it's just something that that's one thing my dad did. He when he was done playing, he played his last year in '66, and then he actually managed the San Diego Padres in '67 and '68 when I was a youngster when they were the AAA Padres in the Pacific Coast League. And so then so that was I kind of my remembering he was more of a coach. He was a hitting instructor for all those years in the major leagues. So that was part of it. And then when you get to your mid 30s and you're kind of like looking around the room a little bit and realizing that your playing career is over. And I've always was a student of the game, and I was just something in the position of catcher. You're so involved. You're involved with every aspect of you. You're involved with the pitching. You're involved with all the coaches. Everything you do kind of, stems around the catcher. So I felt like, for me, I would really like to get into this. And talking to my pops, he said, "Hey, if you want to learn, become a manager. You'll learn real fast." So from that side of it, and so I said okay, and actually Mark Shapiro at the time was our minor league director with the Indians, and he asked me what I wanted to do, and Dan O'Dowd was the day I retired. We were actually playing in Toledo, and I had told our manager I was going to retire, and Dan O'Dowd, who was one of the front office, I think he was assistant GM at the time, but with the Indians, and he said, "I want you to, get involved." So I did that a little bit that summer, and then the next year is when I became a minor league manager and went on from there.
You spent 6 seasons in Cleveland's minor league system from 1995 to 2000. Great seasons for the major league organization. You had a 448 and 333 record. You were in the playoffs 5 of 6 seasons, and certainly had a role in Cleveland's major league success, even when you were coaching on the minor league level.
Well, it's just something we had a lot of good players, and I mean, I had a young team. It was and this is something that you can never really redo, but in '95, I was my first year, and that was the year that we drafted Sean Casey and Mark Budzinski and Ross Atkins. And those three guys still are. I mean, Ross Atkins is the general manager of the Blue Jays, and Bud's one of the coaches. But John McDonald was our shortstop. Marcos Scudero was our second baseman, and Russ Branyan. And I mean, there were players all over the place. And so at that point in time, the Indians would use those players to either help them or make trades to get more players. And so from that standpoint, it was a very healthy minor league system. And as a result, and I was able to take those players from, short A to double A to triple A Buffalo and watch them develop and watch them have success and then about having major league success. So it was just a really good time in Cleveland for the organization, from not only the major leagues but for the minor leagues also.
Now, what qualities are necessary to be an effective coach? How do you make a player better?
I think the one thing that I always tried to strive to is to create an atmosphere that's conducive for these guys to try and step out a little bit. Or it takes a lot of courage to try and make a change. I mean, you're holding on to what got you there. and then you get to a level of ball where everybody's, this is good, and these guys are used to, they're good players, and they got great ability, but you have to be willing as a player to make that slight adjustment or do those things. So you have to create an atmosphere as a coach or manager that allows the players to actually to do that, and to encourage them, and understand that this is what the minor league is designed for, to get out to get out in the deep end a little bit, and do something maybe that's gonna might be a little hard at the start, but at the end you're going to be a better player for it. So it's creating that atmosphere, I think, was the most important thing that allows them to really shine and not look over their shoulder. I think that's one of the biggest attributes a coach can do to get them, because it's not about the coach, it's not about the manager, it's all about the players, and that's the only thing that maybe sometimes it's misconstrued. But at the college level, everything seems to be about the coach. But at the professional level, everything is about the players, and it's all about the players. So you have to, as a staff member, create an atmosphere that's conducive for them to step out and understand, take the, they call it data now, but take the information and go with it.
We often hear that becoming a catcher is the most difficult thing to do in Major League Baseball and as a position player. And when you are developing a young catcher, how do you go about it, and how can your experience help?
Well, I think you have to give them some reins and let them take ownership. I mean, that's any position. If you can get your players to take ownership and understand that, it is a game, and they're the ones get to play the game. And that's the only thing that, from a catching standpoint, that I have a little bit tough time with is all this, stuff where, I mean, if you go to a college game now or a high school game, the catchers, they're always looking towards the dugout, and looking for the coaches are the ones calling the game, and it's just kind of sad. Personally, I think the relationship between the catcher and the pitcher is just so important, and it's something that, if I was to ask a pitcher what he thinks about the catcher, the most important, if he's got the pitcher's back, I mean, the catcher, it's all about the pitcher. It's all about getting him to do his best and to have the outcome that, you can't always control the outcome, but just for him to just really shine and get over the hump or get him through. There's in a course of a game, there's probably only three or four times where you actually have to make a pitch and get somebody out. The rest of it, you're just doing your job. But there's a time, and the catcher can be part of that. And that's at the major league level. I mean, you watch a good, well-pitched game. Most pitchers that pitch a game, well, when I played, over 7 innings or whatever, starters, the good pitchers, all they do is they just don't throw 2 balls in a row. Let's really simplify this. They have control. They don't throw 2 balls in a row. As a result of that, they're usually ahead in the count or even, and they allow their stuff to work for them. But if you're pitching from behind the count, then it's a whole different game.
You remained with the Cleveland organization in 2002. In the middle of the season, Charlie Manuel was fired as the team's manager on July the 11th, and you took over as the interim manager. Tell us about the circumstances surrounding that team, and Charlie leaving and you taking over as interim manager.
Yeah, what happened was, that was 2001. We went to the playoffs. We lost in Seattle. Veteran team. And then in 2002, things weren't going all that great. And so they made the decision at the All-Star break. That was the big trade, when they traded Bartolo Colon away, and they went in the direction of, let's go, kind of a retool or rebuild, or whatever the terms you want to use. So they started trading the veteran players. And so Charlie went in. Loved Charlie to death. He went in and talked to Mark Shapiro at the time, who was the general manager, and said, well, where do I stand type of situation with this new what we're doing now and all this kind of, however that went down. I wasn't obviously proxy to the conversation, but it was just a situation where by the end of the meeting, something was done and Charlie was out. So, but I took over as interim manager, and we proceeded prior from the All-Star break to the trading deadline. We traded all our veteran players and brought in all the young guys and went in that direction. And so it was a great experience for me. I really enjoyed it. We traded guys like Chuck Finley and Steve Reed, relief pitcher, Carsey, all the guys. We traded our players that were how they do nowadays during the trade deadlines, and went with a younger group. Coco Crisp showed up, and all those types of players, and moved on from there. But it was a great time. I really enjoyed it, and then went on from there.
What was it like being a major league manager? Or put it this way, what about it surprised you, given that you had spent a lot of time coaching, and obviously your dad was a manager, so you knew a great bit about it. But when you were actually in that seat, what surprised you about it?
Again, you've been doing it for years and years. I mean, I did it for 5 or 6 years in the minor leagues, and it's just something that, as a catcher, you're involved in the game, and now you're the manager. You just, you work with your coaching staff, and you let the players play, and you make decisions when you feel you need to make a decision, and most of the work though is actually when the game's not being played. That's the part that all the different the time it takes with the communication with the front office and all the that side of the situations is a little bit different than obviously in the minor leagues, but not as but you're communicating with the front office, and you're from that standpoint. But again, it's I'm kind of a keep it simple type of guy from that standpoint, and try not to overthink too much, but be prepared. So your preparation and all that type of stuff is all done ahead of time, and then come game time, it's a lot of fun.
Now, after that season, Eric Wedge was named as manager, and you chose to stay on the coaching staff in Cleveland. Tell us about your thinking.
Yeah, I just went back to what I was doing, coaching third base, and working with the catchers, and doing my, what I had been doing. It was something that I'd been with the organization since, like you said, I got traded here in '89, and I wasn't. There was a job to be done when they needed an interim manager, and so from that standpoint, I filled a spot, and then it didn't go the way, from a standpoint of being the manager, but the opening was still there, what I was doing prior, and I had, living here in Cleveland with my family, and just knowing the organization and what our vision was. I wanted to be part of it, so I had no qualms about it, and I enjoyed it, and it was good.
Fans know about being a third base coach in terms of when runners go around third, the third base coach has to make a split-second decision. But what more goes into being a third base coach than just that?
Well, you have to know your outfield arms. You have to understand the situation, the game. It's just trying to, you try and watch the movie beforehand. You're always looking at the field and seeing where people are playing and all the different aspects of it, the conditions, all the different things that come into playing the game itself, and scoreboard, all the different things that you've already, like I said, you've already tried to play the movie as much as you can, so you're not caught off guard, and go from there. And it's a you're on the field, you're part of it, and it's something that can be very exciting. And again, you're the guy that tries to, you're right there, right in the action.
Now, a controversial situation took place in 2007 during the American League Championship Series against Boston. in Fenway Park. In the seventh inning, Cleveland was down by 1, 3-2, and Kenny Lofton was on second base, and Franklin Gutierrez hit a ball inside the third base line. It ricocheted into left field, and Lofton, who had good speed, was coming around third, and you held him up at third base. At the time, Tim McCarver on television said, "What is this all about?" and indicated, in his words, that you were a bit cautious at third base, and I know you took some criticism for it since it was the tying run, and Lofton was a speedy runner. Tell us about your thinking at the time.
Yeah, it was a situation. I wish I could play it over again, but you don't have that opportunity in sports. But yeah, he hit a bullet down the third base line over the bag. It hit the that in Fenway Park, how it jets out. There's very little room and ricochets back onto the field. And at the time, I saw the ball bounce off the wall, and I know that the shortstops are trained to break over that way, and I couldn't tell exactly where the ball was going to end up, and so I held him. But it was something that I obviously wish I wouldn't have done, but that's how it goes. And as a result, we had runners on first and third and didn't score. And so as a result of that, it's no fun. That's about it. It's not something that I wish I could. Obviously, anytime you're playing sports, it doesn't matter what position you're playing. I happen to be the third base coach, and the only thing that sucks about being a coach is you don't have the ability to go up and hit a home run to redeem yourself. So that's the part that is no fun.
Now, you remained in Cleveland until the end of the 2009 season. Tell us about working with Eric Wedge for so long, what he was like as a manager, and your working relationship.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And Eric is a guy that no nonsense, came up through Wichita State's program as a catcher, had a nice career, and then became a manager. And again, it was quite a turnaround. Like I said, we got rid of the older players and brought in the young guys, and very exciting teams. I want to believe it was '05. We made a real nice run, and with a really young group of players. That was the Grady Sizemores and Casey Blake and just players that we just Gutierrez and all these guys that we'd gotten in trades. And it was something that was fun to watch these young players kind of progress. And Eric was a big part of that, allowing them to do what they did. Struble Cabrera was another young player that was on the scene, and Johnny Peralta, all these kids that came from the minor leagues that just did a great job. And then we were able to sprinkle in some veteran players. I'm drawing a blank, but the pitcher from Atlanta came in and really helped CC Sabathia and all these Jake Westbrooks and the pitching staff. And it was a good group. It was a really good group. It came up short, but again, but Eric was at the running the ship, and it went really well.
And then you served as bench coach in Oakland for the Athletics in 2011.
Yeah, that was a situation. We all got fired after the '09 season, which is part of baseball. And I went to Akron, and Ross Atkins, who's now the general manager of the Blue Jays, was running the farm system for the Indians at the time. And he asked me if I was interested in going to Akron. And so I went back to AA, which is, close to where I live here. And I did that for a year. And then Bob Guerin called me and asked me if I wanted to come help him. And so I said, sure. And so I did that for a year. I'd always wanted to kind of go out to the West Coast. It was something growing up in San Diego, I'd never spent a summer out there. And so I said, might as well go out there, and it was a lot of fun. And then it didn't work out, but it was nice to get out there.
Now, you spent a lot of time coaching on the minor league level. In some ways, do you find that to be uh, more fun, for lack of a better term, only because you get to focus so much on fundamentals?
You know, it's everything has its plus and minuses. The minor leagues is you're definitely working on fundamentals, but that never goes away. And that's the thing that even at the major league level, you're always working with players and you're always doing what needs to be done. At the minor league level, there's, obviously you want to try and win every game, but there is developmental part of it. And from a standpoint of maybe, writing your lineup, or if a kid's, maybe going through a little bit of a struggle, you stick with them, or compared to maybe at the major league level. But again, it's just the love of the game, and it doesn't matter once they play that national anthem. It's a nice ball game to watch and be part of, and help these kids out. But I enjoyed both, major leagues and minor leagues. But anytime you do something, you want to do it at the highest level also. So the major leagues is always kind of something that you aspire for.
You and your dad were the second father-son tandem to manage in the major leagues, following George Sisler and his son Dick Sisler. What did that mean to you?
Yeah, that was exciting. That was something that, matter of fact, at that point in time, my dad and mom were visiting out here in Cleveland, and it was during the All-Star break. I was picking up my son at a golf course. Him and his three buddies were out at a par three, and back then it was like we didn't have cell phones in our pockets like we do now. It wasn't that long ago, 2002, but I got to the golf course, and my son Cameron said, "Hey, pops, they just paged me to tell you, and they want you, and so they want you to call the ballpark." And so I got home and called the ballpark, and Mark told me that I was the manager. So I was able to then go home. My dad was visiting, and tell him, "Hey, pops, I'm the manager of the Indians," and he was excited, and gave me a big hug, obviously. And he's 94 years old. I'm going to go see him next month. But yeah, that was something that it was exciting. I mean, he managed the Phillies, and in the late 60s, after managing their affiliate in San Diego. And so, yeah, we were the second father-son. Since then, I'm good friends with Buddy Bell and his son David, Aaron Boone and Bob Boone. How many are there? Is there any? I know the Bells and the Boones, but I know there's four now, but I don't know. Other than that, you could probably see that maybe on your computer. But yeah, so that's a feather in my cap, I guess.
Yeah, that's Felipe Alou and Luis Rojas.
Oh,
Was it?
okay. Yes.
Yep,
Yeah, there you
and
go.
that's so yeah. So we've got yeah, Buddy and David Bell, and Bob and Aaron Boone, and you.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. And but again, and that's one thing I get. People send me cards, and I have a card of it's a father-son card, and that's the
Oh, the
favorite.
1985 Tops one.
Is that what that? Yeah. So I get
Yeah.
that in the mail, and so my dad still signs autographs, so I'll get that one in the mail, and
Do you
it's
have a
always
favorite baseball card?
that's my favorite one, obviously.
Which makes sense. It's now when what is your favorite on-field memory of being involved in baseball, whether on the major or minor league level?
I think winning is so important too. I mean, you work and you work and you work, and in '83 in Denver, we did win the championship. That was a lot of fun. We beat Louisville from the minor league standpoint, but the major leagues, I do remember the one thing that I'll never forget. It was I hit one grand slam, and it was we were playing the Indians. I was in New York, and my dad had been a teammate with Pat Corrales, and and so I kind of knew who Pat Corrales was. And he went out to the mound one time, and it was the bases loaded. Steve Carlton was pitching, and he kind of he walked out to the mound, but he kind of looked back at me a little bit, and on like crossing the line, and went up and talked to him, and it was like in the middle of the at bat, it was like the 2-0 count. He'd like thrown 2 balls or something. So I'm thinking, man. So I got in the next pitch. I knew it was going to be right down the middle. And he basically just told me, just throw it down the middle, and I ended up hitting a grand slam. And and my brother, one of my brothers had traveled from San Diego on the red eye, and so it was just kind of like it was just a good moment in my career. But there's so many. I mean, it's just and obviously your first major league experience is always fun. And I think looking now that you've asked me, my first at bat ever in professional baseball was in Tampa, Florida, in spring training of 1980. And like you talked about who were my favorite players growing up, and Johnny Bench was catching for the Reds. And I went to step in, and because back then the pitchers hit, so Candelaria started the game, but he only pitched 2 innings, so his spot in the lineup hadn't come up yet. So I pinch hit for him, and they yelled down to the bullpen, "Hey, and grab a bat!" And I'm thinking, what the heck? I didn't have any idea. So I went down there, got loose, and got to pinch hit for Candelaria in spring training. And Johnny Bench said to me, "So you want to be a catcher?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And that was really, and I hit a line drive right to Doug Flynn. But again, that was obviously, I'll never forget that.
And when someone looks back on your time in baseball years from now, how would you like to be remembered?
I just someone that loved the game, somebody that kind of a lifer. I signed up in December of '79 and retired in 2020. So I mean, just love of the game, willing to do whatever, and but I think the biggest thing is just as a catcher, wanting the pitchers to realize that this guy's in it for me, and I think that's the most important thing from a professional as a catcher, knowing that this guy is selling out for me on the mound, and I think that's what you try and inspire the young catchers to do nowadays.
Bill Skinner, we're grateful for your time and for your being with us this morning for our SABR Oral History. Thank you so very much.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed it. Really did.